All right, I see some folks hopping in. We'll give folks a few minutes to trickle in. I see your name there, Connor. Nice to see you. I'm gonna launch a poll here, ladies and gentlemen, just to get a kind of gut check of how folks are feeling about strategic RevOps, topics of interest as well. So it should pop
I'd
up,
be
but you can
curious
also
to see
just
who
hit it.
is anybody even doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a spectrum for sure. So go ahead and hit poll if you don't mind. It should be in the bottom of your toolbar there. Just fill out a couple questions as we wait for folks. All right, we'll give it one more minute and we'll get started here. Pete, it looks like most people are coming in on the poll is the first question, how strategic do you feel in your RevOps role today? Not at all, a little, very strategic. Most people coming in a little bit strategic. So getting there, but not completely. But okay, I think we can get started here. I think more folks will trickle in is kind of the norm for these. I know folks are finishing up meetings in the remote work world. I'm super excited to chat all things strategic RevOps today. Excited to have Pete Matthews here to lead the conversation. So Pete is the founder of Trinsx, excuse me. It's the end of the day, a RevOps consulting firm. But Pete has been doing RevOps like long before it was even called RevOps. So he's done it at companies big and small, in-house, and as a consultant. And most importantly, he's one of the more thoughtful folks that I've spoken to around how to elevate the function of RevOps, which I speak to a lot of people about. So we're super excited for today's conversation. We'll cover what it means to be strategic in the role of RevOps. I hear time and time again that in RevOps, for folks, their biggest complaint is the role devolves into firefighting or being a CRM admin. And so a big challenge that I see here is that folks really need to kind of proactively frame the value of the function and proactively offer up strategic insight to start those high impact conversations. And so Pete's going to dive into that. Among other things, we'll cover what role does RevOps fill in strategy, where should strategic ownership lie, and how can RevOps actually be strategic. And so feel free to ask questions along the way in the chat. I'm certainly going to chime in with questions. I'll field them in the chat. But without further ado, after my big wind up, Pete, I'll turn it over to you to kind of walk through the slides.
Oh, thanks, James. Hopefully I live up to that intro. I appreciate it. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending. As James said, my name is Pete Matthews. I'm the founder of Trinsx, where we help companies establish their foundational and revenue operations infrastructure and strategies. All right, so all of you who are Googling my name right now, I am not a famous juggling comedian, or I'd be doing this presentation on a unicycle, which would still be funny, but in a very different way. All right, revenue operations strategy. One of the things I'd like to all of you consider is one of the things to ask yourself is, what can I do to drive 10 to 15% more revenue through operational strategies? That is always one of the questions I start with when helping companies. How do I drive it through operational strategies? We're going to show you some of that and hopefully have some actionable takeaways after today.
And I think even that, Pete, is just a great point to level set on. I think it's so easy in RevOps to get stuck in like the day-to-day fires. So I need to accomplish this list of tasks. I think the most effective folks that I talk to that I see making VP and beyond are always thinking about like the business impact. And so I think you say this as kind of like it's a given because I know you've been in here like actually driving these strategies for folks. But I think I just even wanted to call out that I think having that mindset is really the first step here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to do it, leave yourself a note every quarter when you do planning, ask yourself this question. So first, let's start with the functional relationship between go-to-market teams and revenue operations. I think this is important because I've seen just so many varieties as how it's set up. And in general, we have the CRO at the top and their direct reports: marketing, sales, customer success, and revenue operations. Marketing in charge of market and brand development, communications, customer experience. sales, revenue growth, customer engagement, account management planning, customer success, certainly account growth and retention, customer enablement, customer satisfaction. Now, revenue operations has a direct line, reports directly to CRO, but it also has a direct communication line, has peers to the other three activity generators there. Revenue operations responsibilities can be broken down into essentially four categories: planning, accountability, infrastructure, and enablement. And a well-structured revenue operations team can make a strategic differentiator. If you support your go-to-market teams with better effectiveness and better efficiency, it gives the company a competitive edge. And that is what I believe is strategic thinking in there.
I think, Pete, like, the strategic thing is super important. As we think about like planning, accountability, infrastructure, and enablement, I think you might cover this in kind of like your next slide. But a lot of that sounds heavy tactics to me too. So I still think it's easy to think through like, what am I stuck doing? Like, how can folks actually level that up to get to like the strategic impact?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easy. We've all been there, right? It's easy to fall into the trap of purely technology under infrastructure. So we'll show you that here. So some of you have probably seen this before in either other presentations or my posts, but this is a revenue operations planning matrix. As I said, you can broken down to four categories. And each of those categories can also be a team, a small team unto itself. So all of you who think like, wow, revenue operations seems to be underwater. We have so many tasks to do. We're always behind. This is a good representation of all the responsibilities of revenue operations and why. All right. This is also a good way if you're starting a new job into RevOps, or you want to take the time to do some strategic planning. This is a great tool to help develop those.
Pete, I love this because it feels like kind of like a self-assessment matrix too. It's like for each of these things, am I spending time on them, first of all? And second, like where on the kind of I guess height of the various rows here am I actually spending that time? And I think if if I were to look here and find myself spending most of my time like below that line, it means I'm probably not having a strategic impact if I'm understanding this correctly. How can folks or I guess actually I'll start with like why are the items at the top more strategic? I think it still kind of begs the question of like what is strategic as it relates to RevOps. So why are these things up top like much more strategic than the things on the bottom?
Yeah, that's insightful, James. I appreciate it. So yeah, like you said, I love the way you looked at that, right? Where are you spending your time, right? And you need to be spending a good percentage of your time at the top half which are strategies. And the top half, why those are strategic, because they can affect and drive the direction of the entire go-to-market team as well as the company. And the lower half are those tactical activities that support those strategies and drive their success. And that's how I, one, built this, and two, how it is, designed to be looked at as well.
Yeah, so
But I
if
think,
I'm thinking about your initial goal of like how do I grow revenue 10, 50% or impact revenue, it feels like the things above the line are those that are doing it, and then the things below the line is kind of the foundation that you do have to have in place and do well to get to those actually revenue moving activities. Is that fair?
that's completely fair. And the one good thing, right? Where are you standing? You should have one of your foot right in the bottom half, and the other foot in the top half. Make sure you're understanding how those affect, especially in revenue operations. We spend our time all over this map as well. But I think one, James, what would really good is let's focus on one of these areas. Like many people, want to, do well with learning from examples. And one of the things I want to focus on is the foundational ones, process optimization. We can drill down and look at how process optimization becomes tactical as well as strategic to help you get along for your company.
Let's do it.
All right, so this is a typical customer journey process. Top half, you have your client side and their stages and how they purchase your products and services. And the bottom half is the seller side and their stages for how they engage in their clients. As you can tell, this is a typical customer journey experience, and it's very linear, left to right, all through. But what this also represents, because this is an actual case study we built for a customer many years ago, The misalignment leads to, in those key areas of those stages, leads to missed opportunities. It represents friction throughout that journey process, as well as impacts to the velocity of your pipeline. But it also represents areas of opportunity where you can improve that customer journey experience in that process. Those companies that better align the buying and selling process provide a better customer experience and increase revenue growth as well. Now, the solutions and activities to better align those key areas of opportunity are tactical. So this is a very tactical look at a customer journey process. The
So sorry,
strategic customer journey.
real quick, Pete, as we go
Sure.
back and we think of this like as a map, I think this is very tactical, but to me it feels like the jumping off point to be strategic. Is that kind of what you're saying here? Where if we start with the tactics to like, first lay out the customer journey, what's the ideal experience for a customer, and then how are things actually flowing through? Like, what is the performance of each of these? Still tactical. Are we then finding an area to go do a strategic deep dive? Is that how we should think about this like customer journey step, or in another way?
So the way the one of the things, right, that our audience has said is I find myself doing very, putting out fires. So you might focus on what this shows is, let's say, there's problems with demand gen in one of the stages. So we put out that fire, right? That needs to be done. And it's a very tactical way to fix that. So you develop the metrics, the tools, and the data to align that. But as they align, right, one of the things that RevOps needs to do is look at the entire picture
Hmm.
and not just that specific one. So yes, this is the lead in to becoming strategic. If you can draw yourself out, bring yourself to that 50,000 view and look at this as a whole.
Got it. Makes total sense.
Yeah. What that leads to, right, is from a business strategy standpoint, the strategic customer journey process is cyclic, not linear, right? So this represents on the outer circle, right, our client side. They still have stages and components where they go to buy your products and services. And then the inner circle is the seller side. They still need to line up, all right? And what this represents is the experience they go through in that alignment. And each one of those components affects that as well. And the experience of those customers as they drive through your processes and engagement drives the behavior of prospective clients down the line, especially in this day of social media and activities, people talk. And the alignment, the optimum, what we're trying to do is create an optimal alignment, what we call creates the flywheel effect. So the strategy is to get the flywheel spinning at the desired growth rate represented by the chevrons here, right? And why this is a good representation and why I like this slide is that it can only spin as fast as the slowest team member. So if marketing is generating a lot of opportunities at their target markets, but sales is unwilling or unable to keep up by taking those opportunities and close them, then that becomes a problem. And likewise, sales, if they're closing at a high growth rate and marketing is not able to find new opportunities, that is also a problem.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of like planning too, Pete. So I think about RevOps coming in and adding value in that, annual planning process, for example, and thinking through all the assumptions you have to make of like, what's our top-down goal, but how much pipeline do we have to hit? But then how many sellers do we need to convert that pipeline and how many CX folks to actually serve those deals? Like if any one of those things are broken in the plan, you're gonna have to like basically replan, right? Or missing your forecast in any number of ways. And so I think this is a good encapsulation of like all the different moving parts that you have to think of in RevOps to make sure you're actually thinking about like how do we move the business forward as a whole and actually drive strategic value, even at say like the enterprise value level.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was a CEO, CRO, and you happen to find yourself presenting, right, and you found a problem through RevOps, you can now pinpoint to where it is, right? So if someone says, why aren't we hitting growth rate? The previous slide, right, the linear one has way too much detail for them to digest.
Hmm.
This one represents a much better digestible means at that level and why it's important.
Hmm.
And like any process, right, the metrics drive performance. Um, so it's revenue operations responsibility to measure that growth and that rate, so that velocity and the spin rate, which we call the flywheel effect. So we want that spinning at a great targeted rate, and identify those areas of friction and what is preventing from spinning at the desired rate. But it also presents opportunity to strategize with the go-to market leaders, right? So if the conversion after the sales is getting success and customers having bad satisfaction, and you can pinpoint that by a data-driven analysis, that gives you an opportunity to have that conversation.
I think that's so important right there and should be like bolded and underlined twice. I think like what I hear in chatting with the most successful RevOps folks is they're using data, which is tactical, to raise the very strategic issues proactively. And that's inherently like how you get in the room and be seen as strategic. Because if you're not the one bringing it, like they might not think to bring RevOps in, but if you actually started the conversation, you own the data, you understand the actual problem, they're probably also going to look at you to help solution, and you build that habit of being kind of brought into the conversation. I think having this systematic view is a good way to kind of surface those insights or know where to start digging.
Yeah, absolutely. And it builds trust with your stakeholders, right?
Definitely.
It enhances that relationship. So now we're going to break down each one of these, right? And this kind of helps you come to the actionable part. And hopefully, the goal is to have you use these things for your organizations. All right, so let's look at marketing. So if you break down marketing into its high strategic components, they're managing campaigns and channels and for their activities. RevOps' goal is to look at what campaigns are generating 80% of the opportunities in revenue. The 80% is key because it typically, just think of your company and how many activities and campaigns your marketing is running. Typically, in almost any company I've been into, there's a fraction of those campaigns that are driving most of that revenue. That goes to identify those, and that's where you pour your resources into those campaigns, which spins the flywheel. Right? Then you look at the conversion rates, cost of those campaigns, and the top 3 friction areas for a positive customer experience. And this allows you, with that data, right, to have a strategic conversation with the executive stakeholders.
How do you think, Pete, that would go? So maybe put yourself in the shoes. I know you're very senior now, but if you were a common profile is when I talk to 200 employee company, maybe one person RevOps team or a 2 or 3 person RevOps team. The person's maybe a director, 8 years of experience, maybe a manager. They're not necessarily like they don't have that seat at the table yet, but they're doing the data part of this, which is the tactical. Like, how would you recommend them taking, let's say, the 80% campaigns are generating or 20% of campaigns are generating the 80% of the revenue. Like, how would you counsel someone to then go like have that conversation? Like, how can they start that to really like, be strategic and help guide the marketing leadership to better action, basically?
Yeah. So one, it's data, right? We go back to the data-driven decision making, what you find. So if you can show that 20% is driving 80% of the revenue, there's a couple of factors here. One, why are they generating? And why the other ones aren't, right? So that's a strategic conversation to have, because that's one, drives a little philosophical market conditions, and brings the stakeholders into the conversation as well. From a revenue up standpoint, the cost now comes into play. So if you're a 200 person company and you have $10 million spending into your marketing activities, and you can identify that 20% is generating 80% of the revenue, you can get rid of the rest.
Hmm.
Right? So now you have more money to spend on those campaigns that are generating that. And if you're a CRO who's fiscally responsible, that means a lot to you in the company.
Yeah, definitely. And if you can position that as, again, revenue impact or a change in LTV to CAC, these are things that the board cares about, which means inherently the CEO cares about too. And so this will probably elevate up the company. So that's great. I wanted to take a brief beat here and just say, if, folks listening, feel free to ask any questions in the chat as well live. We'll save some time for Q&A at the end. I'm also happy to ask Pete any of your questions in real time. Just wanted to put that out there. Sorry to interrupt you if I did, Pete.
No, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, because we want this, your thoughts come up, bring it, right? Revenue operations being strategic is new for all of us as well. We're building this as we go. All right. So sales, while marketing is focused on campaigns and channels, sales is focused on teams, channels, and territories. You will find, again, 20% of the people or those channels and those teams are generating 80% of the revenue. Which ones are those and why? Right? So looking at also in those teams, channels, and territories, their pipeline strength. What is the velocity? And how are they successful at it? And why are those ones not? Right? Cost of sales by the same categories, but adding what's the cost of the activities that they do, not just cost price wise, but time wise, which is very critical for sales. Then looking at those top 3 friction areas of opportunities to help them out as well.
How did you assess the friction areas for that have room for improvement, Pete?
Uh, there's so many opportunities for here. One thing I look at is, will the current strength of your pipeline support the growth? First and foremost, is there enough opportunity that's going to support your future targets? That's forecast. To get down into it, one of the first things I look at is pipeline leaks. Where and why? If you don't think you have pipeline leaks, you never looked. Take a look. Where's opportunities falling out? That's one of the first areas I look. The other ones are, where are the areas of little to no activity? Why are there gaps? What are those conversion rates? And are those slow conversion rates? One of the things to think about in pipeline is the movie Moneyball. How are we pushing people around the base? And all we need to do is get on base. And where are those gaps? Where am I struggling? So those are some of the key areas that you can look at.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how often there's low-hanging fruit as well. Something we see in accounting with accounting customers as well, just really good accounts just completely not contacted. And we say, hey, we recommend, this is not really even an accounting software thing. We say, hey, we recommend you put an SLA in on these ICP accounts. And if a rep doesn't touch it in X days, call it 30, call it 60, depending on your business, shift that account to someone who will work it. And pretty instantly, those accounts get touched because people don't want to lose their prospects. And then, there's often like a, 12, 15% bump in pipeline creation just from that. And so I think some of these friction areas are almost kind of silly and have a lot of upside benefit too. So I think it's a great call out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the way you put that, right? Once you start looking, you tend to find things no one expected, right?
Yeah.
The other way to look at it is, if you have your A players, the people and teams that are doing really well, why are they doing well? A great analogy is the tide floats all boats. If you can make those folks, they're 10 for 15% more effective, the other ones will follow.
Totally. And I thank you to the Good Samaritan who kindly called me out in the Q&A section. Ask your questions in Q&A, not chat. Sorry. So if you're trying to type in chat, that will be disabled, but you can type in Q&A.
Right. All right. Success and support. Right. So a lot of it is the same as sales. You have teams and channels and territories looking at what generates the best customer experience or revenue. Then what customers are in growth, static, and decline. This is a lot of where the rubber meets the road, right? Everyone is happy with the sales, and then after the sales, are your customers satisfied? And understanding where there's areas of satisfaction and dissatisfaction lie. Again, looking at the top 3 friction areas for customer implementation support and why they're being effective or not effective as well.
And so let's say you looked into, I think on here, Pete, is which customers are in growth, static, or decline. This reminds me of like business school. We talked about this a number of times, like what your profitable customers too, who's growing, who's declining. Once you have this information, like what's a typical like plan of action that folks would do like with that once you kind of have the data all set?
So this is a great area of discovery, because customer satisfaction reveals a lot of unknown activities of why someone's happy or unhappy. All right. So a customer might be happy with the product, but they hated the transition from sales into customer support. They felt left out. Right. But if you have a good transition and they feel supported, that might be well, but there could be a variety of reasons why they're unhappy or happy. Now, if they're growing, that's where I tend to look for first. Why are they happy? Why are they satisfied? And how do we replicate that? And are we falling down with the ones that are not? One of the things I typically find is they are different personas or different customer target markets because there's an expectation. And that's one of the key things that will reveal is what was their expectation coming in and how does the data show that? Then you can use that to replicate or fix those key areas in there.
Super helpful.
Yeah. Obviously, you can see a pattern here, everybody, right? Why top three? It's just a good number to look at because you'll never get to five, right? And you consistently, that's one of revenue operations, systematic removal of reasons of barriers to customer satisfaction there. Advocacy. Advocacy is important in today's world. It tends to be an afterthought. It always seems like it's someone else's responsibility. But a successful advocacy program significantly reduces the cost of sales and keeps the flywheel spinning. In today's socialized world, customers talk and they talk to their peers. And if they have a great experience, they're going to talk to those. So in the advocacy program, you're looking for customers who can be advocates by vertical product and persona. And that's going to impact everybody along the line in your company. Look at those areas generating those opportunities by the same categories and looking at those advocacy campaigns and their success rates. And then again, finding those, if a customer won't be an advocate, finding out why. What is interesting in this, every time I've done this, there has been several reasons why a customer won't be an advocate, and it tends to surprise everybody. So it's a great experiment in your company to understand why, especially if it's if in prior, in early parts in the stages of the process, it might affect it where you have a greater impact into the success.
Yeah, I love it. Definitely the forgotten aspect of RevOps, or go to market generally. I think those are great call outs for sure.
Yeah. So that's it. So now ask yourself, how would I drive 10 to 15% more revenue through operating strategies? So let's open it up. Any questions? And no, I don't juggle. So
I think maybe for the second webinar that we do with you, Pete, you should learn to juggle because I think that would actually be add a fun element. Yeah, again, so folks that are on, please ask any questions you have in the Q&A. I have a couple questions that were sent in before the webinar started, so we can start with these and we'll see if any more kind of trickle in. I think the first one
hey
is just
James,
around.
do you want me to stop sharing so we can see,
Yeah,
or
go ahead.
what's?
Yeah, feel free to stop sharing. The first question I have, Pete, and this was. Yeah, I think we still see your PowerPoint there. They're perfect. The first question I think, Pete, and this actually showed up in the poll I did at the beginning, is that folks are so busy firefighting. And so I think one reaction here might be like, this is fantastic. These are like good strategies to go move the business. But I'm so dang busy dealing with like the fire hose of things that are just popping up every day, especially on a lean team. Like, how can folks think about doing this while in that state of just triage all the time? Like, any tips or advice from your experience that can help folks kind of get out of that state?
Yeah, you and I both have talked about this, James, and we hear it a lot. It's a tough nut to solve in here, but there are things you can do. So first of all, I would highly recommend when you're sitting down with your manager, have the strategic conversation. Does your executive team even consider revenue operations as a strategic component? If they do, great, ask why, right? If they don't, but they have considered it, that's a great opportunity for you to step up and say, I see it as strategic and here's why, right? Present your case, advocate for yourself. If they agree and you get to the point, you go to the next step. Well, how would that occur, right? I need resources. I can't get out of firefight mode. Those are crucial conversations that you're going to have at that level. There are
Yeah.
some very, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the advocacy piece is important there too. And I think your discussion today is actually a good map for that around we can help you improve revenue 10, 15% through these operational strategies. We just need like the bandwidth to actually implement them. And here's a
Yeah,
few that I have in mind too.
yeah, absolutely. And they may not even know that exists, right? They may not even know the breadth of it. So you have to advocate yourself. In the tactical world, there's several things you can do to rely. If you have a team, rely on your team. Your team will, if you're a good leader, it's a great opportunity to shine. They'll step up for you. Two, how many of us have tons of vendors we're managing? This is one of the forgotten ones. Put your vendors to work. Let the CRM guys or let those vendors come in and help you. They have, one, have seen it all. Two, can provide guidance and take on some of the workload, right? I have a great thing. If you have a problem, you have three choices. You can train it on one of your teams, you can hire it, or you can buy it, right? When you break it down to those things, that's where you can have a conversation with the boss. I'm trying to solve this problem. I don't have the skill set yet, but I can get the skill set this way, right? Train it, hire it, or buy it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then how about there's a question around accountability. And so I often chat with folks where it's like, I think RevOps, I think I actually thought about this with your pipeline example of, we're short on pipeline coverage and kind of the outer periods here. This is going to be a disaster for the company, towards like next quarter, basically. We're going to be really short on pipeline. We're going to miss our number. We got to do something about this today. But say the head of sales might be in just total deal mode. They're in every deal conversation. They're not maybe the most operational like head of sales, and so they just don't really have the time to like support RevOps. Anything RevOps can do to kind of get through this? Is it a similar answer as you just gave? Is it a hopeless situation? Like I'm sure you've seen this before. How can folks deal with that?
So if you can't have that conversation with your boss or the head of sales, maybe there's a more fundamental problem, and they may not see you as that or what have you. So one of the things to consider. I have been in that situation, and it came to a head with me and the head of sales. He was banking revenue on letters of intent, and I couldn't tell him just by my own experience that letters of intent didn't mean much. And so I pulled the data from the last 18 months and showed the path for letter of intent. Now, if you have a good head of sales, that will mean something. That builds credibility for you. That builds trust. But have the conversation with them first, right? Before you start accusing anybody who's going through that, you have to build that rapport in there. But you also have to figure out how you're going to help them, right? So you can't just bring the bad news. If it's not going to do, show them, right, your plan. Even if they don't take it, you need to show that you're strategically thinking and looking out for their jobs, right? This is how I see we get out of this. This is how I see we build pipeline. This is how I see we going through that, right? Think like they think. How are you going to help them?
Yeah, that's great. And I think best piece of career advice I ever got was make your boss look good, and
Oh,
things will probably be taken care of. Well, it looks like that's it on the Q&A that's come in, and so I think we're a little bit over time here anyway. We'll probably wrap up here. Pete, thanks so much for coming on. This is really helpful. If anyone has questions for Pete, kind of following up, feel free to funnel them to me. I think you have my email from registering here, and I'll make sure they get to Pete, and we'll get those questions answered for you. Pete,
yeah.
thanks a lot for
Or
taking the time.
you can do the Google Pete Matthews. If you add RevOps, then I'll come up. Just make sure you add RevOps to the end of it. So
Don't contact
you
the
can reach out
juggler.
to me.
Thanks so much, Pete.
Thanks, James.
Cheers.